Power and supply chain managers know that the actual disaster is the loss of infrastructure in times of emergency. So when the lights go off, and the grid goes down, how can the public and private sectors work together to get critical resources back on the fastest? Fortunately, there is no shortage of critical information available, even in dark times. Data sets available to private and public stakeholders provide millions of points of shareable data. From 511 traffic alerts, infrastructure information, live weather updates, and impacts on facilities, the issue only arises when one wishes to access and share this information cohesively across sectors and state lines. Recently, the COVID-19 pandemic shone a light on the crux of this issue. How can stakeholders collaborate coherently to move resources and fleets to the places they are needed most? A public-private partnership years in the making has the answer. Created to provide fleet managers, drivers, and stakeholders complete situational awareness while drivers are on the road, the Fleet Management app enables route planners to navigate hazards and plan through all forms of logistical support in real time. Background: collaborating during crisis. In 2013, Superstorm Sandy affected 24 states and amassed over $65 billion in damage across the eastern seaboard and as far inland as Wisconsin. The collaboration needed on such a significant catastrophe required massive coordination. Subsequently, the electric sector and the Department of Homeland Security requested help from the allhazardsconsortium to reduce delays for utility crews across state lines. Delays were occurring at way stations, toll states, and construction sites across the eastern half of the country. These delays jammed restoration efforts in the wake of the historic storm. As a coordinated response to these delays, under the AHC, multiple sectors, including electric, finance, fuel, food, and communications, came together to form the Multi-State Fleet Response Working Group. The goal was to allow the private sector to work closely with the states and local governments while still maintaining autonomy during a time when open communication was critical. The consortium allowed for two things. The first was protection from frivolous Freedom of Information Act requests from competition, media, and non-operational candidates, while still allowing for communication and information sharing when relevant. The second was a framework for neutral ground and facilitation. The vision was to provide an app that would show drivers and fleet managers problems, blockages, and resources along a movement route. So the team got started. When COVID-19 hit, allhazardsconsortium and the working group could put the fully functional and vetted app into practice for the first time, post-testing. Background: COVID-19 collaboration. The FleetMove app was put to the test on a large scale and further improved upon during the 2020 to 2021 COVID-19 pandemic. From the Alabama State Emergency Management Agency, Bethany Elliott experienced the FleetMove app firsthand during a time when collaboration across public-private stakeholders was direly needed. A part of the Multi-State Fleet Response Working Group, Elliott detailed the ins and outs of advanced collaboration during Day 3 of the allhazardsconsortium 2021 Summit. During the COVID-19 crisis, Elliott and others were able to put the Fleet app to the test and improve upon it greatly with feedback from real users in a real crisis situation. Elliott learned that many of the issues faced by fleets centered around a lack of knowledge. Private fleets needed to move critical resources for the public's good but became stalled by waivers, regulations, and restrictions from the public sector. A lack of knowledge of obstacles ahead and where managers would face fleet restrictions impeded recovery. Additionally, partnerships between private sectors needed to be strengthened and capitalized upon. Where could fleets sleep, eat, and refuel during a time when most of these resources weren't functioning? Traffic backlogs were also a concern for all parties involved. Would a storm be forcing a fleet to reroute or pause in the delivery of a shipment of critical PPE? From the state perspective, a disaster situation presented the same issue from the opposite direction. The state and local governments needed to know who was moving through the state to grant weight limit waivers, escorts, and additional help. Advanced collaboration is not always an easy thing to achieve, but during catastrophes as widespread as a global pandemic, collaboration becomes even more integral. Advanced coordination includes marrying the concerns of both the state and local governments across an entire route while accounting for food, fuel, lodging, and the needs of your fleet. The Multi-State Fleet Response Working Group overcame several challenges and fine-tuned the Fleet Response app during this stressful time. One significant benefit that Bethany saw was the maintaining of ownership by the private sector. She stated that the government, in this case, was just here to help the private sector coordinate among themselves and with the government to get things done in a disaster. This app, with private sector ownership, enabled teams during the pandemic to collaborate efficiently and quickly. During a disaster, stakeholders know that situational awareness is everything, communication cannot delay response, or everyone suffers. During COVID, Bethany and the working group were able to use the app to hone in on problem areas, overcome them, and pivot quickly. These lessons learned improved the app's functionality overall and increased usability. The real-world testing by Bethany Elliott and others during the pandemic also solidified the need for private-public partnerships and a functional fleet app with private sector ownership. Why is this important? In 2020, the data sets that the consortium and fleet working group had been pulling together for years finally came together within an Environmental Systems Research Institute (ESRI) framework. In this case, ESRI is a Geographic Information System (GIS) platform that AHC was given access to with COVID-19 specific funding. The Fleet Movement Working Group was then able to compile years' worth of data into the live Fleet Movement app, a much more sophisticated application than was initially dreamed. The new app came about not just by the electric sector but also driven by any sector transporting goods, services, and finances who needed to know anything threatening their drivers and resources from point A to point B. Within the SICE framework, sensitive information is shared on the app in an environment that protects that data. With sensitive data protected, and the framework, technology, and processes in place, the app went live on a limited basis in October of 2020 to assist disaster responders and fleet groups with Hurricane Sally. For this first live event, the consortium tested the app on 3 utility groups in several states. All Hazards Consortium testing the app allowed for synchronizing specific information and routes while refining the fine details. Each utility group gave feedback on the app, allowing it to improve further. This level of repeated testing allowed for critical improvements. The app has continued to be refined ever since and will continue to do so well into the future in the spirit of collaboration and enhanced situational awareness. Why would you benefit? The Fleet Movement app exists for anyone moving anything across state lines during a situation begs for speed, confidence, and coordination. Whether financial resources, goods, or services, the AHC created the Fleet Movement app to help get resources to the people who need them the most. When the lights go off and the power grid goes down, the Fleet Movement app allows for the required coordination to resume functionality. During COVID, George Eason from Centerpoint Energy used the Fleet app to help him and his crews know what obstacles and situations were ahead of them prior to arriving in a location. The app shows COVID hot zones and cool zones by zip code, driven by live data. When the chance of spreading a contagious disease was high, the app gave the situational awareness needed to make smart, safe decisions. The app allows for real-time information sharing, which can translate into knowing where a fleet can stop for gas and find safe hotels amid a crisis. Giving a driver or a fleet manager information they might not usually have increases situational awareness and eases fears about going into an emergency blind. Knowing the nearest rest areas, where the maintenance shops exist, where the closest hospitals are, and where a commercial fuel station is concerning a fleet is critical during disaster situations and allows managers to stay on top of logistics in real time. The Fleet Movement app contains vetted information all in one place. Managers and drivers don't need to search around for information that might not be reliable. The app allows for synchronization between the home office and drivers, with the complete confidence of knowing the information shared is up to date and accurate. On the governmental side, the Fleet Movement app allows the states and local municipalities to know who is involved in an operation and how they can assist at any given time. Reliable state personnel can see fleet routes and movements in real time and communicate with police, toll operators, and way stations to expedite critical action. Perhaps most importantly, the app allows synchronizing information between multiple parties on a large scale instantaneously. As Centerpoint Energy found during the trial run, this benefit works to reduce delays and even eliminate them drastically. The app is not publicly available and remains quarantined under SICE via subscription only, allowing for further confidence of all parties involved. Protecting sensitive data and information from FOIA requests, non-operational use, and non-vetted parties ensure that all data remains accurate, confidential, and available for use at the moment of issue. The Fleet Movement app allows top minds to collaborate and look to the future, enhancing the possible art. The app will continue to evolve organically, marrying future capabilities as they arise with current data during blue skies and disasters. What else could the app do for you, your fleet, your state, or your country? What are the components of the Fleet Movement app? So as not to overwhelm the drivers or fleet managers, the geocentric Fleet Movement app shows data only for the areas of interest within a specified mileage or zip code during a disaster situation. Within the app, users will notice right away that red and purple lines populate the map. The purple lines are significant highways and resource routes drawn from data given to AHC through the fuel sector, communications sector, among others. Purple lines allow fleets to increase situational awareness and plan for significant stopping points, busy highways, and fleet-appropriate roads. The red lines indicate states, indicating a disaster declaration of some type. Selecting a red state brings up a new window with further information about the disaster declaration for that particular state, with a link to the disaster declaration document in question. A benefit of using the Fleet Movement app is access to these declaration documents. Importantly, fleet drivers within their trucks and officials in the home office have access to these documents well before the general public. Thanks to the state network within the consortium, declaration information can be posted and attached within the trusted app framework prior to the declaration going public. Further within the app are colored blocks indicating hot, cold, and mild zones based on live data feeds. For instance, during an incline or decline in COVID cases, the data will turn red, yellow, or blue, respectively. Opening up the data layer icon allows the user to see the trending data and what each color represents. The COVID data, in this case, is based on live data feeds from the Center for Disease Control. This data allows crews to remain abreast of essential data regarding fuel, food, lodging, and other critical information. This situational awareness allows management to know what sorts of environments a fleet is moving into and plan accordingly. In times of COVID, this coincided with PPE shortages, vaccinations, shelter-in-place orders, and other restrictions critical for planning out a fleet route designed to keep drivers and personnel safe, sanitary, and secure. Another important layer of information for situational awareness is road closures. The Fleet app pulls this data live from 511 and other published state transportation department resources and, to a lesser extent, crowdsourcing apps like Waze. When moving through a disaster area, some crowdsource apps are not as accurate as the state system of record. The Fleet app uses the data with the highest confidence factor when showing data sources. These data sets are ranked using the Operational Readiness Level, or ORL standard. All app data is run through the ORL standard to determine if it is ready for operational use prior to being shown on the application. The integrated 511 and traffic closure data set allows fleets to plan for reroutes, avoidances, and stops. Yellow blocks in this instance indicate a partial closure. Knowledge of this sort is critical for fleets and management to avoid delays when transporting crucial supplies and personnel across a disaster zone. Additionally, the app maps all types of resources currently available along with a chosen fleet route. Shutting off COVID in 511 layers allows a user to view this information with the most accuracy. The app shows these resources with indicators like forks and knives for restaurants, fast food, and convenience stores where drivers can find food, as well as gas pumps to indicate refueling stations. It is important to note that not all fuel stations and restaurants in the country are shown on the app, in order to avoid overpopulation. Each indicator on the Fleet Movement app will show the status of the resource in question. This includes whether the facility is open or closed, as well as the address of the facility. During and after a significant storm situation, the data will change to show power outages and other closures that would impact fleet movement. Lodging works much like fuel and food, with lodging being vetted and limited not to overwhelm the user and app. Each facility on the map shows a phone number and address so that drivers or fleet managers can call ahead to ensure enough room for a fleet on a given night. As the AHC and working groups add data layers to the app in addition to fuel, lodging, and food, there is no extra or increase in cost to access the additional information. Users of the app receive the different data sets as they are found and integrated to maintain high usability and relevance for fleets. A layer that can be toggled on or off is the weather layer. As those in the disaster field are well aware, it is not unusual for a severe weather incident to produce other severe weather incidents in its wake. Expanding the weather dataset allows fleet managers and stakeholders to know if drivers are headed into a storm surge and plan routes accordingly. In an additional paid service, the user may toggle live traffic on and off. Live traffic data, in this case, originates from Esri and different feeds such as OpenStreetMap. This data is most useful in a non-disaster zone to show speeds and other information. Although the data may be helpful, the 511 data mentioned previously is more reliable in a disaster situation. An exciting feature provided by the Federal Emergency Management Agency is the social media aggregation layer. Blue dots on the map indicate social media posts and pictures, crowdsourced and posted as they occur. FEMA aggregates these photos and posts to give further situational awareness in a disaster zone, directly from those experiencing it. Each post is given a date stamp for further clarification. In summary, the Fleet Movement app provides a vetted, real-time look into a situation through data ranked and rated by the Operational Readiness Standard. Both public and private partners supply information to provide holistic and detailed views on utilities, fuel, food, pharmacy, water, commercial entities, traffic, and much more. The app allows for synchronization of situational awareness for fleet and resource movement across both time and space and is the only resource in the United States that operates in such a manner. The Fleet Movement app merges state, federal, commercial, and crowdsourced data into one common operating picture, protected from FOIA. The app synchronizes and aids in increasing information across an ever-growing pool of data, continuously updated by the AHC working groups. Outcome: Crisis Communication Test Drive. In the fall of 2020, the All Hazards Consortium got the chance to test the Fleet Movement app on 2 utilities in an actual disaster situation. The first test was in Texas, and the second in the northeastern United States. The Northeast Utility Company sent resources from New Jersey and Pennsylvania to the Gulf Coast following Hurricane Sandy. The company utilized the app to assist drivers in understanding the obstacles ahead of them moving into the disaster zone. Tom Moran of the All Hazards Consortium noted in an interview that, "The feedback we received was great because it gave the utility company situational awareness of what was ahead of them." Into what were the fleets driving was Moran's next question. They had never had that before. So this was really good, and it was in real time. The second component noted by the utility company was that the Fleet Movement app allowed for synchronized information with the home office without delay. The drivers also got access to data they didn't usually get to see. This data included live updated information on disaster declarations and waivers, road closure data, and shared snapshots of the road ahead. The drivers using the app commented, "That was really great. It was unique, and it really helped us." Moran notes that one way the Fleet Movement app is being implemented is by a utility company wanting to know when all their contractors are in the utility operating territory or close by. Moran noted that during COVID times, social distancing is crucial, and 400 trucks can't show up in a region at once. The tracker data included within the Fleet app allows for that sort of critical information sharing. Outcome: the states communicate effectively. On Day 3 of the All Hazards Consortium 2021 Summit, Bethany Elliott and Carrie Trapasso discussed the benefits of the Multi-State Fleet Movement Working Group and the helpfulness of the Fleet Movement app. Elliott, from the Alabama State Emergency Management Agency, works in the Office of Executive Operations. During emergency activations, she reports directly to the Alabama AO and serves as the Critical Infrastructure Support Branch Director for overnight operations. During COVID-19, Bethany, like many others across the world, had to switch gears abruptly. In her new role, she utilized the Fleet app to ease her transition and provide quick, effective communications. Tom Moran reflected on the collaboration with Elliott and the Alabama EIC, saying, "More data came out of Alabama than we've really ever seen before. It really got Alabama on board with the idea of how this information sharing can work. They loved it." The app allows representatives across agencies, from federal to local, to accurately assess boots-on-the-ground information, better feed information requests, and assist the private sector during disaster times. Elliott herself concurred, stating that the app allowed Alabama operational situational awareness and the ability to coordinate actions with utilities dynamically at a regional level, not just in an Alabama-only scenario. State-to-state information is crucial during disasters but not always there. With the Fleet app, Elliott was able to allow the state of Alabama to communicate with other states like Virginia and Tennessee on fleet movements. This communication allowed for groundbreaking broader regional situational awareness during a time when concise communication was needed most. During the summit, Elliott stated that the FleetMove app aided Alabama immensely in advance coordination. When fleets needed a law enforcement escort, it was able to be worked out in advance. For the private sector, she stated, knowing when and where a fleet could stop for fuel and lodging allowed private-public coordination, ensuring available rooms and operating gas stations during a critical time. The fleet will know ahead of time in their planning where they can go to do that. Elliott stated during the summit, so that makes it very beneficial for us.